All right, well, I think we will get started. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. This is the next in our series of comprehensive plan discussions. This one is going to be focused on Silverdale and particularly the Silverdale Regional Center. A lot of folks would call that downtown, but we'll go into more detail on that in a moment. Next slide. So how we're going to kind of work through this, we're going to have a brief presentation that basically kind of talks about what is a regional center, why is it important, and what are some of the regional and countywide guidelines. We can't just call anything a center, something it actually has to meet particular criteria. What are some of the existing conditions in Silverdale? A lot of folks have lived here for a significant amount of time. Some people are new to the area. How do we get to where we are? Planning for Silverdale's growth. There's where we are today, and then there's where we want to go in the future, and exactly how could we go about getting there. And then after that, we are going to have some breakout groups and some discussion Q&A, as well as some survey questions to kind of get to what hopefully will be a larger group by the time we get to that point, to kind of talk about exactly how Silverdale can grow into a more robust 24/7 community versus what it is today. Again, the breakout groups are going to be, there may just be one or there may be two, depending on how many folks attend. And that's an opportunity for us to kind of run through some questions, but for the attendees to kind of talk about their thoughts about Silverdale and its future. And then as usual, if you have any kind of technical issues, please email ajarrett@kitsap.gov. And again, these are technical issues with the actual Zoom. If you're having a technical problem with your actual computer, I cannot guarantee we're going to be able to help you with that. But if there's an issue with the Zoom, we should be able to do that. Next slide. So like we do at the beginning of every one, the comprehensive plan is one piece of a puzzle. Starts with the Growth Management Act, which is a state statute that directs growth and directs how counties must address growth and how we must address the environmental impacts. Then we have the Regional Vision 2050 plan. That is a plan that's done by the Puget Sound Regional Council, which Kitsap County and its cities participate in. That plan includes King, Pierce, and Snohomish counties, as well as Kitsap. And we all work to have a kind of a collaborative set of goals and policies, and especially population and employment targets when we're talking about growth in the case of Vision 2050 through 2050. And then the next step down is the countywide planning policies. This is overseen by the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council, which is made up of the county and its cities, tribe, Port of Bremerton, Port of Kingston, tribes, more than one. These folks, again, really kind of work on a very coordinated set, as again, where one city stops and the county starts is not obvious or clear all the time. And this is a very important organization to ensure we are maintaining some kind of consistency to the public in planning. Also, both the Puget Sound Regional Council and Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council are incredibly important for the access to federal dollars. These federal dollars come through these entities to our jurisdictions. They are intended to handle growth in many ways, but also they do fund projects like in the Silverdale area, the Buckland Hill Bridge. I believe even the Silverdale Way improvements all had federal money in it. So it is very important that we maintain consistency with these plans. Next slide. So how did we get here? Historically, Silverdale used to be a farming community, and with Schold Farm, it still has some of its farming roots. Its main transportation system was made up of farming roads. Silverdale Way, Kitsap Way, and Viking Way was the way to get north and south before the State Highway 3 was constructed. So Silverdale's basic main roadways were established back when this was a more agrarian community. Obviously, in the 1970s, the Trident nuclear subbase and Keyport were built / expanded, and along with them came a sewage treatment plant. When a sewage treatment plant was installed up there on Brownsville Highway, greater possibilities became possible for Silverdale. We are kind of at the connection of what is State Highway 3 and State Highway 303. So in the late 70s, early 80s, and moving into the 90s, Silverdale grew into our retail center. One of the main anchors for that retail center was the Kitsap Mall, right then during the big mall boom. And we again became a place for employment, a place for retail, a place for services for all around Kitsap County, when historically those had largely been located in downtown Bremerton. Some of the other anchors that you see today and have grown over time, of course, is the new hospital that was built over on Ridgetop Boulevard. That is now our main hospital and is our key medical center, not just for this peninsula, but for the Olympic Peninsula as well in many ways. And then we also have big box retail. We have Costco, all those others. And then we do have Old Town, which is kind of a smaller, quainter community, hasn't faced quite as much growth, doesn't see the big box stores, more of a small town, small community laid out in that grid structure that you don't necessarily see in the remainder of Silverdale. And the long-term economic health of this area will require work. We have to focus on what Silverdale will be tomorrow. Obviously, retail is starting to diminish in regards to its ability to stay open. COVID really hammered home the importance of having people living very close to certain commercial ventures, especially restaurants and services. When people stopped driving into Silverdale to shop, they oftentimes stopped driving into Silverdale to eat, to recreate, to do a number of other things, and a number of businesses suffered. So we need to find a way to grow Silverdale into more a 24/7 community, one that has retail, has residential, and has other employment uses all located in the downtown area for walkability and a number of other characteristics that Jim and Colin are going to walk you through. One thing I did forget to do is to kind of do introductions. Again, my name is Eric Baker. I'm the Deputy County Administrator for Kitsap County, been with the county for 30 years. Jim Rogers.
And I am Jim Rogers, long-range planner with DCD.
Colin Poff.
Colin Poff. I'm in the long-range planning division, long-range planning supervisor.
And I think we also have Kirby with us.
Hi everyone, Kirby Mesablu-Yobek, Environmental Programs Planning Supervisor.
We do have other staff here, but these will be the folks that will be helping you through the meeting tonight, as well as the breakout groups. Next slide.
All right, so the first thing I'd like to do is, first of all, I have to apologize for my voice. I think this smoke in the air has really gotten to me, so I'm sounding a little raspy, so I apologize for that. I'd like to start by going back to our regional guidance and just start by reading the vision for regional centers to give you an idea of what centers are supposed to be at a high level. Regional growth centers are located, are locations characterized by compact, pedestrian-oriented development with a mix of office, retail, civic, entertainment, and residential uses. Regional growth centers are envisioned as a major focal points of higher density population and employment, served with efficient multimodal transportation infrastructure and services. And that is from PSRC's Vision 2050. Now the next slide, we're looking at regional centers framework that comes from PSRC and Kitsap County planning policies. They place criteria on what our centers need to look like and how they should develop to match the vision. Centers should be somewhere between 200 and 640 acres, what's described as a walkable area. That's about 1 mile across. The existing density of a center should be have about 18 activity units. Activity units are what are a way that PSRC measures density. And basically it's a sum of the population and employment divided by the acres. So if you had 5 people living on an acre and also 5 jobs on that acre, you would have 10 activity units. We also need to plan for frequent transit service in the center and plan to accommodate significant residential and employment growth. On the next slide, we can see where we are today in relation to the center's criteria. The half-mile radius there that you can see, there's a relatively compact walkable area. As you can see, at 848 acres today, we're a little on the large side. However, we have been able to shrink it from the original 2003 boundary, which was over 1,000 acres. So we are making progress on that front. You can also see that the center is home to many more jobs than population. We hope to improve that balance as we densify the center with more mixed use. And that balance will hopefully help us increase our activity units to a point where we can exceed the 18 activity unit minimum. We're currently only at 13. Now there is a push, as Eric said, to meet these criteria or potentially risk losing our center status. That scenario would be problematic as much of our funding for transportation and capital facilities projects and other programs would be in jeopardy if that center status is lost. Next slide. Here I'd like to touch base on the primary documents just briefly that help guide Silverdale's development. The first one is the Silverdale Subarea Plan. The Silverdale UGA, which is the large yellow area, is centrally located within the county between Bangor and Keyport. Typically, UGAs are adjacent to a city, and it is expected that the city would eventually incorporate the area. Silverdale, however, is not associated with the city. The assumption is that Silverdale will someday become a city of its own, hopefully before Bremerton reaches out and grabs it. The last incorporation attempt in 2013 failed with only 30% of the vote. Silverdale is a regionally significant retail center and employment center for the county, employing over 13,000 people. Next slide. Moving on to the regional, oops, too far. Yep, here we go. All right, moving on to the regional center plan. It has many goals and policies. Too many to list here, but I have tried to summarize those goals for you here. To create a compact, mixed-use, attractive urban community that prioritizes pedestrian safety for all. Create a network of parks, open space, and non-motorized trail systems. Establish development standards based on urban rather than suburban densities and needs. Measure progress towards implementing the Silverdale Regional Center Plan, and reduce the share of trips made by single occupancy vehicles. Next slide. Also, to create a street system that supports the vision for the redevelopment of Silverdale. Incentivize transit and multimodal transportation trips. Improve stormwater quality and management. Improve the environmental functions and fish and wildlife habitat. Create a sustainable community. Develop greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, and incentivize the development of affordable housing for persons of low and moderate income. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about the design standards. These design standards for Silverdale were created in 2009. Silverdale has 9 distinct design districts, which have specific design standards for new development. These standards provide guidance to ensure new development is compatible with existing development patterns or to influence a desired change in those patterns. These standards typically only apply to new development or redevelopment where greater than 50% of the replacement value is exceeded. Smaller remodels are not affected. Next slide. Transportation implementation strategy. This project was completed in 2018. The project identified transportation needs, both current and future, developed projects to meet those needs, and then prioritize those projects for funding. Not all projects have funding designated for them, but the top priority projects are advanced to the funded portion of the Transportation Improvement Program. Ridgetop is one of those high priority projects. It is a large and expensive project, so it's been broken up into phases. In this case, the road is scheduled to widen to 4 lanes for improved mobility and safety, and to ease congestion through near the new transit center. It will also have bike lanes and pedestrian facilities. Another part of the strategy is to look for opportunities to fund projects as Silverdale redevelops. A couple of those projects shown here on the right are opportunity projects where the funding in whole or in part would be through partnerships with property owners, stakeholders, and private interest groups. These projects are flexible and subject to change as funding becomes available over time. And with that, we have our first survey question for you tonight. What description fits you best? All right, looks like we've got everybody participating. Looks like most people just visit for running errands and shopping or visit for recreational purposes. Awesome, thank you. So in our current comprehensive plan, some of the strategies for the current center are to develop Silverdale into an area of mixed use development, so jobs and housing together, higher densities. Remember, we're trying to plan for 45 activity units per acre, affordable housing options, create a network of parks and open space, design the urban area for people and not just cars, and create a sustainable, attractive urban development, and with an emphasis on transit and non-motorized trips. Next slide. So per GMA and countywide planning policies, the county needs to plan for expected growth in all jurisdictions. Silverdale's share of that countywide growth between now and 2044 is a growth in population from our 2020 census tells us we have about 19,675 people in Silverdale. We're supposed to grow that by almost 10,000 for a 2044 target of over 29,000 people. On the job front, we have 13,000 jobs. We're supposed to grow that by 11,400 for a 2044 target of 24,697. So the question is, how do we get to a place where Silverdale can accommodate that growth? And at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Colin.
Thanks, Jim. The last few slides will be kind of talking about what strategies we might be looking at in the comprehensive plan update to get to where we want to go with Silverdale. You know, what tools does the county have available in a comprehensive planning policy to analyze and implement? So as you can tell, the Silverdale Regional Center is going to be a big piece of our comprehensive plan update. It includes criteria that we need to meet as a regional center. It includes the accommodation of a lot of population and employment growth that's coming to the county. Needs to be a lot of that centralized in the Silverdale area, in the Silverdale Regional Center specifically. And also, one thing to point out about regional centers is that while they accommodate a lot of growth, they're also places where a lot of kind of hallmark planning efforts take place for regional centers all in the Puget Sound area, but what the county would want to take on. And a lot of that needs to happen in the Silverdale area. So the challenge is to know what tools do we actually have to be effective in the transformation of Silverdale. So as the image that you can see here, you know, it's still largely the suburban commercial development pattern that's existed for some time, with large blocks, big distances between buildings, and large amounts of surface parking. So something then needs to be a catalyst for development patterns to begin to change as growth gets accommodated, and more people live in this area as well as work in this area. So regional centers, by definition, are supposed to have more elements of urban or a mixed use area. Some of those elements are of course lacking. And for example, that might be kind of a main street, or it might be ground level retail with sidewalks, or more mixed use buildings. There are a lot of surface parking lots in Silverdale, which certainly provide capacity for potentially more buildings and connections between areas. So there's a need for development patterns to change, but there's also multimodal transportation needs as well. So of course, there are needs for automobiles, which is to continue to accommodate trips, but also understand that right now a large percentage of those trips are through traffic, and there should be a priority also on local trips and local trips that are non-motorized as well. So non-motorized needs might include, well, of course, a lot of that's a function of more people living downtown and different urban form, but also streets that are complete streets that accommodate more modes of travel with bike lanes and sidewalks, of course. Protected intersections provided, or bike lanes that are low stress, or potentially in this case, a multi-use pathway through the center. And of course, better connectivity in general to complete gaps that exist in the road network or the pedestrian and bike network. And then the other element, of course, is transit. Transit needs would be, well, there's a new transit center there near Ridgetop Boulevard, and provide better connectivity to that transit center, including non-motorized access. And the other would be to give priority improvements to key transit corridors of Silverdale and Ridgetop, so that bus travel can actually compete as a way to get around. So that's kind of setting the stage for the vision of Silverdale and transformation. And a lot of these things have existed for some time as ideas, but it's about looking at also what are some of the tools that we have for implementation. So that's one thing that we look at as we do our comprehensive plan update. So again, talking kind of about what are those tools that we have. The first I would say is, of course, would be development regulations, and not necessarily more regulations, but removing barriers to the types of downtown development that you want to see. It's likely to allow potentially more uses. So in this process, we want to revisit standards for infill development, our standards for parking minimums, height standards, density, allowed uses, things of that nature. And also, again, not just development regulations, but actual incentives for more multifamily or mixed use development can be explored. One of those is multifamily tax exemption. You might hear that term. That is an 8 or a 12-year tax exemption that can, again, incentivize potentially a developer to do a project that would otherwise not seem as feasible. And there's a public benefit that could come from that as well, including different public benefits, or the provision of affordable housing can be attached to something like that. The other is transfer of development rights. The county does have a transfer of development rights program that should be reviewed, and that could be another incentive for downtown development. And the other is streamlined permitting, not just in terms of time, although that's very important, but just reviewing how our permitting works and what different types of reviews have to take place, and making things more predictable. So these are things that we'll review. And the other would be redevelopment. Of course, there's not a lot of greenfield development in downtown Silverdale. So we want to look at code that actually responds to redevelopment. You know, lately we've seen a lot of large tenant improvement projects that might trigger some design standards or things in our code, but also we want to look at see if those things are working, or are they providing barriers. So that will be important. Just a couple more slides. The next of how do we get there is about urban design, of course. The importance would be to look at our transportation network, potentially create street corridor concepts that have multimodal standards, or development standards, again, with that redevelopment code or our design guidelines that are related to street frontages and smaller block sizes and things that get us more towards that development pattern. And our design standards, as Jim mentioned, are from 2009. So those should be reviewed again to see how effective that they're being, or if any of those are actually providing barriers to certain kinds of development. So that should be reviewed or potentially codified. These are just some ideas that are in the suite of options for Silverdale. And lastly, the next slide. Of course, transportation and mobility go hand in hand with land use. So that's why we talked about the transportation implementation strategy and a lot of the priority projects or opportunity projects that are out there, because this is these are of course important to the grand scheme of things. So with that, like Jim talked about, we want to identify funding opportunities for non-motorized connections, trails, and improvements to improve multimodal transportation, but also to lower single occupancy vehicle trip share. And that could have something to do with spurring kind of the market for other uses and other types of development in Silverdale. And then increased connectivity, so that could be smaller block sizes, improving the road network, or densifying the road network, and mid-block crossings and things of that nature. I have just a couple of survey questions.
Hey, Colin.
Here.
If I could interrupt you, it looks like we have a hand raised in the audience. Should we take that question before we go forward?
Yeah, I think, yeah, we can go ahead and do that, and then I'll have a couple of survey questions, and then we have breakout rooms where we can talk some more. But sure, Marcus, did you have a question for us? You can unmute yourself if you wanted to ask a question. It looks like it might only have chat function for him.
Yeah, from here, it looks like he does not have a microphone. So we'd have to, Marcus, you'd have to put your question in the chat box.
Yep, if you put it in the chat box, we'll definitely get to it, or might be able to get one of us in the breakout rooms as well. So just a couple of last survey questions, food for thought here. What is Silverdale's most attractive quality? We think that might be all the responses. Okay, so looks like we had a mix here. A couple of you said that the most attractive is the shopping and dining options. The Clear Creek Trail system was the most popular, and it's Silverdale's central location, also attractive quality. And just one more survey questions before we go into breakout rooms. What do you think is the most pressing issue? Of course, they're all pressing, but what do you think is the most pressing issue for Silverdale as it grows over the next 20-year period? All right, thanks everyone for participating. Again, we kind of a mix throughout. Again, yeah, these are all important issues. Housing affordability and housing options, along with the Silverdale Regional Center, housing affordability is a paramount concern for the comprehensive plan update. And so is protection of the environment. A couple of you said that's important for Silverdale's future. Traffic congestion is a concern for a couple. Higher wage employment opportunities for one of you, and a couple said multimodal transportation options and adequate parks and recreation opportunities. So pretty much split between all the options. So with that, Are there any questions in the chat function or any questions that anyone wanted to ask about our presentation before we move on to breakout groups? Let's see here. What is the current percentage of bike commuters versus cars? That's a good question. I believe it's probably pretty low on the bike commuter front, but I don't know if I have the actual statistic. I don't know if Jim or Eric, if you have knowledge of any statistics of that.
I think in the past, numbers I've seen are less than 2%.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, it is definitely less than 5%. Some of it is due to the limited opportunities for biking. Some folks obviously are looking to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. That would lead you to Silverdale Way. That being said, Silverdale Way at certain times of the day may not be the most inviting opportunity for biking.
Correct, yeah. Thanks for that. All right, so with that, that's our presentation. I hope it was informative for those of you that are here, and we'd love you to stick around. And we have breakout groups where we have a couple of other questions that we want to ask and have some good discussions. So, Alex, are you able to break us up? I think probably 2 groups would make the most sense.
Yep, I will set you up in 2 groups, and then those attending, it will ask you to join the group. You just have to make sure to click the button, okay?
And also I encourage all of you to reach out to us with any questions or thoughts kind of after this. This won't be the last opportunity to be involved with Silverdale or the comprehensive plan process. So why don't we see Jim, did you or Eric want to kind of share what you guys talked about in your group?
Yeah, I can go over the questions and some of the answers here. First one was in Silverdale, where in Silverdale should residential and commercial development go? And whether it should be mixed or separated. So the primary answer on that one was a mix of use, but separated uses in close proximity was the answer on that one. And in areas where densities may increase, what urban features would make most those areas more desirable to live in? Shared use path along Clear Creek, dog park and places to interact with community members, landscaping and sidewalks, and need to be bold in thinking about concepts to make those things happen. How can the county better incentivize residential and mixed use development in downtown Silverdale? Better jobs, higher wage jobs. Safety issues, pedestrian security was a concern. Need to visualize or show visualizations of development types to get people interested in living there. Need a town square or gathering area. Provide low-income housing and prioritize low-income housing permitting, make it faster and cheaper. And talk to developers to help us figure out ways to do that. Strategies and incentives to encourage higher wage jobs. Co-join with tech firms, maybe in Bremerton. Hire a consultant to focus on job creation. Better advertisement, team up with the Navy, and provide adequate housing for the workforce. Also try to attract anchor companies and provide good connections to nature. That's what people want. And the question was raised on whether mixed use would be appropriate in Old Town. That's part of that. And on the transportation, not motorized side, what would get people out and enjoying those amenities more? Safe travel north-south on Silverdale Way. So the addition of bike lanes and better sidewalks there probably. Having attractions along the way, like ice cream shops or small craft stores, things like that, places to visit. Small shops and restaurants along the waterfront or trail system. Some examples were presented. Ideas to look at Boise, Idaho, Bellevue's Central Park area, and Duck, North Carolina. These places have been successful in doing these types of things, and we should be looking at those as examples. Provide better connections to the waterfront and Clear Creek Trail system. Maybe scooter rentals and trails for all modes. What changes would you make in Silverdale's transportation system? Maybe a foot ferry to Bremerton. Bring better transit connections so you don't need a car. More buses and more paths. In the downtown area, what's missing? A town square. Boise, again, was another example of a hub of activity in the downtown square area. And is there any low-hanging fruit? It was mentioned that maybe some trees or shrubs in the Old Town area could be removed or trimmed to improve views of the waterfront. More bike and walk options, accessible services, and to access them more easily, and bike ped paths through the area. So that was the gist of it, I think. Eric, if I missed something, please let me know.
Nope, I think you hit the high points. Thanks for everything that the group provided. It was really entertaining.
I really appreciate it. Okay, we had one more group, so I'll go through. I'm sure we had a lot of similar responses and some different ones. So I'm going to share my notes on the screen if I can. And we have quite a bit of notes, so forgive me if I go through these quickly or abbreviate anything. I don't mean to shortchange these great ideas, but the first question is, where in Silverdale should residential and commercial development go in the future? Or should they be mixed, either in close proximity to one another or within the same developments? A couple of times the word patchwork came up, so Silverdale has a patchwork of development. There are separations of uses by underused pieces of properties and separation of natural areas like Clear Creek trails. There needs to be some connectivity between areas for biking and a network for alternative transportation options to connect that patchwork of developments. The comment about our infrastructure and that we need to have a longer view for road development and transportation system. Roads are constrained, sometimes built too small for the long-term vision. We need an overview of development planning of Silverdale to see the patchwork and address connectivity. There's a lot of asphalt in Silverdale that heats up the city. So the idea to install solar units on parking, cover or on the top floors of buildings, ways to add green space. Important to include design standards to require streetscapes, require certain types of elements in those streetscapes to slow down traffic. Back to the infrastructure comment, the roundabout specifically on Newberry Hill and Silverdale Way are short-sighted planning examples. And then incorporate the idea of carless streets so people can be seated at restaurants and other businesses. Or the idea that generally places where people go and congregate should be maybe a little bit more quiet and less busy. In areas where densities may increase, what urban features would make those areas more desirable to live in? Someone commented that Silverdale Way had trees chopped down near the baseball park, and that we need to increase trees along rights of way. And more trees, more nature. It can be done in small patches to enhance greenery and plant cover. An amenity is just more walkability and more walkable areas. The example was some of the density that's gone in Poulsbo. There needs to be more pocket parks, picnic tables, areas where people can stop and sit outside. Kingston is an example of being close to transit and people being able to walk around to and from transit stations. This one was about incentives. So how can the county better incentivize residential and mixed-use development in downtown Silverdale? There was a lot of ideas that were brought up, and we're definitely kind of looking at the suite of incentives here. We discussed the incentive for developers to build diverse housing types, where developers don't build the affordable housing, but pay for those into a fund for affordable housing. I think that was talking about fee in lieu programs to provide towards a pool of fund for housing. Inclusionary zoning, that's requiring a certain percentage units to be affordable. Partnering with Habitat for Humanity. Discussion about the multifamily tax exemption. Wanting to point out a comment that the cost of building materials and labors makes it difficult to build affordable housing, but also that regulations themselves can drive cost up. There was a question that we should be having conferences with other counties and cities to see their successes and failures behind incentives. I think that comment also is about working with the developers themselves, and certainly something that we are intending to do. Is there a vehicle or mechanism for big employers to provide housing for employees? Something that we want to talk to our big employers about their challenges with finding worker housing as well. Make sure it's a possibility for, well, many people work from home, make sure it's a possibility, look into co-op living. Important to have balance, make sure community is livable. More green, good place to live. That balance is again about regulations being, you want to have a balance between regulations being a cost for development, but also important to have to make sure your community is livable. The next one is on the same lines, that the Department of Community Development makes it difficult to build due to cost and permitting. The next one about co-op housing again. And then we want to identify where Silverdale is competing with. So people that want to live there, where are those demographics and how does that compare to other surrounding areas? And what are they looking for? What strategies and incentives would you like to see to encourage higher jobs in Silverdale? Partnerships with Kitsap Economic Development Alliance. And look at other industries. Getting employers currently to pay higher wages, and there's the concept out there of basic income. Tax structures, talking about actual lower taxes. And we want it to be a desirable place for employers. Silverdale is mostly a retail area. Retail is not the highest paying gig necessarily, and we can diversify industries in Silverdale. Getting down to the last couple here, aside from the weather, what prevents you from walking or biking in the downtown area? What incentives or amenities would increase those uses? The first one is that it's just unsafe. They're saying it's just kind of just worried about safety going just by going out on your bike in Silverdale. It's also ugly to walk and bike in Silverdale. It needs to be more enjoyable. So I agree, safety and that's enjoyable are things that are incentives. There's a comment that it does rain a lot here and the commute distances are far. So it is that is a big barrier to wanting to bike and walk. And Kitsap Regional Library was an example of a place with a beautiful biking area, but not enough bike parking. And then number 6, what changes would you make to the Silverdale transportation system? More connectivity, easy and direct for cars, but improved walking and biking, and better scenery for those areas. Kitsap County should look to serve the areas to bring people in from outside the Silverdale area. Safer routes for people that live in Silverdale to get around. And again, example of short-sighted was the interchange with Highway 3. It's a big barrier to connectivity. That came up a couple of times for driving as well as biking and walking. And then down to number 8 here, the last one. What are the low-hanging fruit opportunities that Silverdale should be taking advantage of now? One was about transit routes, that looking at our transit routes and seeing if they could work better, work with Kitsap Transit. More art centers, gathering spaces, people where you can get together creatively is something that can happen in the short term. And also those fixes for pedestrian safety, mid-block crossings, connection to schools, connections to trails, etc. is something that is a near-term opportunity. So we had a lot to go through. Thanks for that. And that was all of our comments. I think that would conclude the meeting. Kirby, Jim, or Eric, is there anything that you wanted to add? Nope. I'll go ahead, Eric.
I don't think so. Thank you for all the great conversations. It's appreciated.
Yeah, really appreciate the great conversation. Again, this will all be up on the website, and also feel free to contact us. I think you should, if you're not already on our notification list, please be added to that. And also, you can send any comments as well now to the compplan@kitsap.gov email, and we would definitely be able to receive those and respond to those. But yeah, thank you everyone for taking some time tonight to be here and talk about the Silverdale Regional Center. Next week, we're going to have transportation will be the topic of our meeting, so maybe we'll see some of you there.
Very
Thanks,
good.
and have a good night. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.